Chapter 12, Learners with Exceptionalities. Here are some of the questions that will be answered throughout Chapter 12. Who are learners with exceptionalities? What is special education? What is response to intervention, or RTI? This is intervention designed to get students on speed with their grade level. What is inclusion? What are effective strategies with disabilities in general education? Who are learners with exceptionalities? They are individuals whose physical, mental, or behavioral performance differs from the norm. Additional services meet the individual's needs. The major difference between a disability and handicap is that a disability is an inability to do something specific, such as being unable to hear or walk, while a handicap is a disadvantage in certain situations. People-first language is important. Utilize appropriate message of respect. Put people first when referring to people with disabilities. The student goes first. For example, Richard is a student with a learning disability. Avoid making the person equal the disability. Once students are labeled at risk or special education, teachers may have lower expectations for them, resulting in low student achievement. So it is important that we avoid making the person equal the disability. Here is a list of percentages of children ages 3 to 21 served under IDEA. IDEA stands for Individual Disabilities Education Act. Take a look at specific learning disabilities. Look at the percentage. The largest category of students with disabilities is students with a learning disability. Who are learners with exceptionalities? Number 1, mental retardation. These students will be taught by teachers with a special education degree only. 2, learning disabilities. This is the largest category of students with disabilities. Characteristics of learning disabled students, LD students, include that they may have difficulties in listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning, or computing. Who are learners with exceptionalities? There are also students with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. Students do not qualify for special education unless they have some other disability condition defined by law. 504 is not special ed. Section 504 students may have accommodations. Other students who are learners with exceptionalities include students with speech impairments. Speech therapists will take care of those students. Language impairments is another exceptionality. Next, we have emotional and behavior disorders, also known as ED or BD. The autism spectrum, students with sensory, physical, and health impairments. Gifted and talented students are also considered special ed students. Here is a chart of the percentage of all students with disabilities ages 6 to 21. In the past, Students with exceptionalities received no special services. Language utilized was not sensitive. They attended separate schools. People with serious disabilities were shut away in institutions or left at home. Mild cases were isolated in schools. In the late 1960s, conversations began about education of children with disabilities. The federal government reacted and finally began passing laws. Here is a timeline of the special education laws. In 1975, Congress passed Public Law 94-142. It prescribed the services all students with disabilities must receive and gave the children and the parents legal rights. Least restrictive environment, LRE. If a student needs special education services and is placed in the least restrictive environment, what does that mean? It means he will be placed in the general education classes as much as possible and only removed for special education services if necessary. Individualized Education Plan. This is an IEP. It guides the services students with disabilities receive. It describes student problems. It delineates specific course of action to address the problems. It enables everyone concerned with a child to help formulate a plan. Students' parents must agree and sign the IEP. An IEP is a written plan for a specific student's education, and it must include specific education goals. Contents of IEP contain general student information. Information in an IEP must never be repeated. It is very important to read IEPs. There is an array of special education services from the least restrictive environment to the most restrictive environment. It is suggested that you watch the video posted in Moodle related to RTI, Response to Intervention. Response to Intervention, or RTI, means using modifications to instruction or intensive services in the general education classroom before referring a struggling student for special education. Response to intervention is an approach that places the emphasis on providing preventive intervention to assist students' learning. Inclusion requires that students are placed in their least restrictive environment. Students with disabilities have more contact with students without disabilities. Some research on inclusion shows the following. The next few slides show effective strategies for students with disabilities in general education. The intentional teacher is one who welcomes the opportunity to have an inclusive classroom, works with special education personnel to write IEPs, consults regularly with special teams and parents, uses ongoing assessment to assess the progress of all children, creates a nurturing social environment for learning, modifies and adapts instruction as necessary, utilizes activities where students interact with each other, Cooperative learning, flexible grouping, buddy systems, and peer tutoring are all good strategies. It is important that we reflect on how we will become an intentional teacher. I am a new teacher and it is 2 weeks before school starts. What instructional strategies should I use in my classroom to facilitate learning for my students who have emotional and behavioral disorders? Consider this reflection.